The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Clarence's house as Camilla, queen consort, prepared for another day of royal duties. She reached for her jewelry box, a habit as natural as breathing, to select her accessories for the charity gala that evening. Her fingers searched among the familiar pieces, but something was wrong. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized her most precious possession was missing. The emerald and diamond ring, a gift from Charles on their wedding day, was nowhere to be found. It wasn't just any piece of jewelry. The ring held deep sentimental value, crafted with stones that once belonged to Queen Elizabeth's personal collection. Charles had commissioned it specifically for Camilla, and she never removed it except for the most delicate royal ceremonies. Camilla's hands trembled slightly as she searched through every compartment of her jewelry box. She checked the bathroom counter, the bedside table, and even looked under the bed. The ring had simply vanished. Her lady-in-waiting, Margaret, noticed her distress immediately when she entered the room to discuss the day's schedule. "Your Majesty, is everything quite all right?" Margaret asked, observing Camilla's unusually flustered state. "My wedding ring from Charles?" Camilla whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's gone, Margaret. I can't find it anywhere." The news sent a quiet panic through the household staff. Margaret discreetly organized a thorough search of Camilla's private quarters. Every cushion was lifted, every drawer examined, and every surface scrutinized. The housekeeping staff joined the search, checking the laundry, the bathroom drains, and even the rubbish bins. Hours passed, but the ring remained missing. As the afternoon wore on, Camilla's anxiety grew. She couldn't concentrate on her scheduled meetings with charity representatives. The thought of telling Charles about the missing ring filled her with dread. How could she explain losing something so precious and irreplaceable? The ring wasn't just jewelry. It was a symbol of their love and commitment, blessed by the Queen herself before her passing. The palace security was quietly notified, though they were instructed to handle the matter with absolute discretion. The last thing the royal family needed was another scandal making headlines in the tabloids. Word of a missing royal jewel would create a media frenzy that could overshadow important royal work and charitable causes. By evening, despite the extensive search efforts, the ring was still nowhere to be found. Camilla had to make the difficult decision to attend the charity gala without her beloved ring. She chose a different piece from her collection, but nothing felt right. Throughout the event, she found herself unconsciously touching her bare ring finger. The absence of the familiar weight, a constant reminder of her loss. The evening's charity gala was held at the Royal Opera House, where Camilla was scheduled to meet with donors and supporters of various causes close to her heart. Despite her inner turmoil, she maintained her composed royal demeanor, smiling graciously and engaging in meaningful conversations about literacy programs and animal welfare initiatives. However, those closest to her could sense something was amiss. Charles noticed her distracted state immediately, but waited until they were alone to inquire. When Camilla finally confessed about the missing ring during their car ride home, Charles's face showed a mixture of concern and determination. "We'll find it, my darling," he assured her, taking her hand gently. Perhaps it simply fell somewhere unexpected. These old houses have many hiding places. But privately, Charles wondered if something more serious had occurred. The security protocols around royal jewelry were strict, and very few people had access to Camilla's private quarters. The possibility of theft, though unthinkable, couldn't be completely dismissed. He made a mental note to speak with the head of security first thing in the morning. The next morning brought no relief to the tense atmosphere at Clarence's house. Charles had spoken privately with the head of palace security, Commander James Harrison, who assured him that a discreet investigation would begin immediately. The security team would review all access records and interview staff members who had been in the vicinity of Camilla's quarters over the past week. Camilla barely touched her breakfast, her appetite lost to worry and sleepless nights. She kept replaying the last time she remembered wearing the ring, trying to identify the exact moment it might have disappeared. The previous Tuesday, she had attended a garden party at Buckingham Palace, followed by a private dinner with close friends. She distinctly remembered having the ring during the garden party, because she had admired how the emerald caught the sunlight. Margaret approached her with the day's correspondence, but also with concerning news. "Your Majesty, I've spoken with the other ladies-in-waiting and the housekeeping staff. Everyone is deeply troubled by this situation, and they're all eager to help in any way possible. However, there's something else we need to discuss." Camilla looked up from her untouched porridge, sensing the gravity in Margaret's tone. "What is it, Margaret? Please, speak freely." "Well, Your Majesty, some of the staff have mentioned that there was a new temporary worker in the housekeeping team last week, a young woman named Sarah Collins. She was hired through an agency to help with the extra cleaning required for the garden party preparations." Camilla's heart sank at the implication, though she tried to maintain her faith in people's inherent goodness. "Surely you're not suggesting that this woman would steal from us? We must be very careful about making accusations without proof." Margaret nodded respectfully. "Of course, Your Majesty. However, Commander Harrison believes it's worth investigating all possibilities. The woman completed her temporary assignment on Wednesday and hasn't returned since. Her references checked out initially, but they're conducting a more thorough background investigation now." The weight of suspicion felt heavy on Camilla's shoulders. She had always prided herself on treating palace staff with respect and kindness, regardless of their position. The thought that someone might have violated that trust felt like a personal betrayal. Yet she knew that jumping to conclusions would be unfair and potentially damaging to an innocent person's reputation. Charles found Camilla in the garden later that afternoon, sitting quietly on a bench overlooking the rose garden that had been one of Queen Elizabeth's favorite spots. Her usual vibrant energy seemed subdued, and he could see the toll this situation was taking on her. "Any news from the investigation?" he asked gently, settling beside her on the bench. "They're looking into a temporary staff member who worked here last week," Camilla replied, her voice heavy with reluctance. "I hate to think that someone we welcomed into our home might have. But then again, I can't imagine where else the ring could have gone." Charles reached for her hand, noting again the strange emptiness of her ring finger. "We must let the professionals handle this, darling. If someone has taken your ring, they will find the evidence. If not, we'll continue searching until we discover what really happened." Meanwhile, Commander Harrison's team was working methodically through their investigation. They had obtained Sarah Collins' address from the employment agency and were preparing to make a discreet inquiry. The agency reported that Sarah had seemed professional and competent during her brief employment, with no previous complaints or concerns about her work. The security footage from the palace was being carefully reviewed, though the cameras didn't cover all private areas out of respect for the royal family's privacy. What they could see showed Sarah performing her cleaning duties in various rooms, appearing to work diligently and professionally. As the day wore on, other members of the royal household began to hear whispered rumors about the missing ring. Princess Anne, who had always been direct in her approach to family matters, called Camilla that evening to offer her support and practical advice. "These things have a way of working themselves out," Anne said, in her characteristic no-nonsense manner. "Either the ring will turn up in some unexpected place, or the person responsible will make a mistake. In my experience, guilt has a way of revealing itself." That night, as Camilla prepared for bed, she found herself staring at her reflection in the mirror. Without her wedding ring, she felt somehow incomplete, as if a part of her identity had been stripped away. The ring had become such an integral part of who she was as Charles's wife and as queen consort. Its absence felt like a visible reminder of vulnerability in a life that required constant strength and composure. 3 days had passed since the ring's disappearance, and the palace security team had made significant progress in their investigation. Commander Harrison arrived at Charles's private office with a folder of documents and a serious expression that immediately caught the king's attention. "Your Majesty, we've located Sarah Collins and conducted a preliminary interview," Harrison began, settling into the chair across from Charles's desk. "She lives in a modest flat in South London with her elderly mother. The neighbors describe her as quiet and hard-working, someone who takes care of her sick mother and rarely socializes." Charles leaned forward, interested in every detail. "And did she cooperate with your questions?" "Initially, yes. She seemed genuinely surprised by our visit and readily agreed to answer questions about her time at Clarence House. She spoke positively about the experience, mentioned how honored she felt to work in such a prestigious location, and expressed gratitude for the temporary employment. But Charles sensed there was more to the story. When we asked if we could take a brief look around her flat just to eliminate any possibilities, her demeanor changed completely. She became nervous, defensive, and ultimately refused our request. She claimed it was an invasion of privacy and said she needed to speak with a solicitor before allowing any search. The change in Sarah's behavior was concerning, though Charles knew it didn't necessarily prove guilt. Many innocent people became nervous when questioned by authorities, especially those from working-class backgrounds who might feel intimidated by palace security. What's our next step, Commander? We can't simply force our way into someone's home based on suspicion alone. We're working with local police to determine if we have sufficient grounds for a search warrant. However, we need more evidence than just nervous behavior and opportunity. We're also checking local pawn shops and jewelry stores to see if anyone has attempted to sell a ring matching the description of Her Majesty's missing piece. Meanwhile, Camilla was struggling to maintain her usual schedule and public appearances. At a literacy charity event that afternoon, several photographers noticed she was wearing different jewelry than usual. The press hadn't yet picked up on the story, but Camilla knew it was only a matter of time before someone noticed the absence of her signature ring and began asking questions. The charity event took place at a primary school in East London, where Camilla was scheduled to read stories to children and discuss the importance of early literacy programs. Usually these events energized her and reminded her of the meaningful impact of her royal duties. Today, however, she found it difficult to focus fully on the children's bright faces and eager questions. During a quiet moment between activities, the school's headmistress, Mrs. Patricia Williams, approached Camilla with genuine concern. "Your Majesty, forgive me for saying so, but you seem a bit tired today. I hope everything is well with your family." Camilla managed a grateful smile at the woman's kindness. "Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Williams. Just a few personal matters weighing on my mind, but nothing that can't be resolved." The headmistress nodded understanding and squeezed Camilla's arm gently. "Sometimes life throws us unexpected challenges even when we're trying to help others. The children absolutely adore you, and your presence here today means more than you know." That evening, William called his father to check on the situation. As heir to the throne, he understood the potential implications if the story became public. The royal family had worked hard to rebuild their reputation and public trust, and any suggestion of internal security breaches or staff misconduct could be damaging. "How is Camilla holding up?" William asked, genuine concern evident in his voice despite their sometimes complicated relationship. "She's trying to stay strong, but this is taking a toll on her," Charles admitted. "The ring isn't just valuable monetarily. It represents something much more personal and meaningful. She's devastated by its loss." "Have you considered the possibility that it might not have been stolen at all? Sometimes things fall into the most unlikely places. I remember when Catherine lost her engagement ring during a family holiday. We searched everywhere and eventually found it in George's toy box, where he had apparently hidden it because he liked the sparkly stones." Charles appreciated his son's attempt to find a more hopeful explanation, but the evidence was pointing in a troubling direction. "We haven't given up hope of finding it in some unexpected location, but we also can't ignore the timing of its disappearance coinciding with new staff in the house." As night fell over London, Sarah Collins sat in her small flat, staring at a wee newspaper photograph of the Queen Consort at the charity event. Her hands shook as she read the caption describing Camilla's work with literacy programs and her dedication to helping disadvantaged children. The weight of her actions pressed down on her like a physical force, making it difficult to breathe normally. In her bedroom, hidden inside an old jewelry box that had belonged to her deceased grandmother, lay the emerald and diamond ring that had caused so much anguish. Sarah had never intended for things to go this far. What had started as a moment of desperate temptation had spiraled into something much more serious and frightening. William had been thinking about the missing ring situation since his conversation with his father the previous evening. Something about the whole scenario troubled him beyond the obvious concerns about security and Camilla's distress. As someone who had grown up in the public eye and understood the pressures faced by palace staff, he wondered if there might be more to Sarah Collins's story than met the eye. The next morning, William made an unusual decision. Instead of leaving the investigation entirely to palace security, he decided to take a more personal approach. He instructed his private secretary to arrange a discreet meeting with Sarah Collins, not as an interrogation, but as an opportunity for honest conversation away from the intimidating presence of security officials. Your Royal Highness, with respect, this is highly irregular, his private secretary, James cautioned. Commander Harrison and his team are perfectly capable of handling this investigation through proper channels. I understand your concerns, James, but sometimes a different approach yields better results. If this young woman has made a mistake, perhaps understanding her circumstances might lead to a resolution that benefits everyone involved. William's instincts proved prescient. When Sarah received a call requesting a meeting with the Prince of Wales, her carefully constructed defenses finally crumbled. The weight of guilt, fear, and desperation had been crushing her for days, and the prospect of facing William directly forced her to confront the reality of her situation. They met in a small private room at a community center in Sarah's neighborhood, chosen specifically to make her feel more comfortable than she would in a palace setting. William arrived with only one security officer, dressed casually in a simple suit rather than formal royal attire. Sarah appeared nervous but determined when she entered the room. Her hands trembled slightly as she took a seat across from William, and he could see the exhaustion and stress etched in her young face. "Sarah, thank you for agreeing to meet with me," William began gently. "I want you to know that this conversation is intended to help us understand what happened, not to intimidate or threaten you in any way." Sarah nodded, unable to trust her voice initially. After a few moments of silence, she finally spoke. "Your Royal Highness, I need to tell you something, and I need you to know that I'm not a bad person, despite what I've done." William leaned forward slightly, his expression encouraging rather than judgmental. "I'm listening, Sarah, please take your time." The story that emerged was one of desperation and impossible choices. Sarah explained that her mother had been diagnosed with early-onset dementia and required expensive care that the National Health Service couldn't fully provide. Sarah had been working multiple jobs to pay for private care assistance, but it wasn't enough. Her mother's condition was deteriorating rapidly, and Sarah had been told that a specialized treatment program might help slow the progression, but it cost thousands of pounds that she simply didn't have. When I was cleaning Her Majesty's room, I saw the jewelry box open. Sarah continued, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. The ring was so beautiful, and I knew it must be worth a fortune. For just a moment, I thought about how that money could help my mum, could give her a chance at a better quality of life in her remaining years. William listened without interruption, recognizing the genuine anguish in Sarah's voice. Her story reminded him of countless people he'd met, through his charitable work, who faced impossible situations with limited resources and difficult choices. "I took the ring, without really thinking it through," Sarah admitted. "But as soon as I got home, I realized what a terrible mistake I'd made. I've been carrying it around ever since, unable to bring myself to sell it, but also terrified to return it. I know what I did was wrong, and I know there will be consequences. Do you have the ring with you now?" William asked gently. Sarah nodded and carefully withdrew a small velvet pouch from her handbag. With shaking hands, she opened it to reveal Camilla's missing emerald and diamond ring, the stones catching the light even in the modest surroundings of the community center. William felt a mixture of relief and sympathy as he looked at the recovered ring. The piece was undoubtedly beautiful and valuable, but seeing it in Sarah's trembling hands made him think more about the human cost of the situation than the monetary value of the jewelry. "Sarah, I appreciate your honesty, and I can see how difficult this has been for you," William said thoughtfully. "The situation with your mother sounds incredibly challenging, and I can understand how desperation might lead someone to make choices they wouldn't normally consider." "Will I go to prison?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I deserve whatever punishment comes, but my mum needs me. If something happens to me, there's no one else to take care of her." William was quiet for several moments, considering not just the legal implications of Sarah's actions, but also the broader questions of justice, compassion, and the responsibilities that came with his position. The ring could be returned, but the underlying problems that had led to its theft remained unresolved. "Let me ask you this, Sarah. If there was a way to help your mother get the care she needs, would that remove the temptation to make such choices in the future?" Sarah looked up at him with a mixture of hope and confusion. "I don't understand what you're asking, Your Royal Highness." "I'm asking whether this situation might be an opportunity to address not just the immediate problem of the missing ring, but also the circumstances that led to its disappearance in the first place. William's unexpected response left Sarah speechless for several minutes. She had prepared herself for arrest, prosecution, and the devastating consequences that would follow. The possibility that the Prince of Wales might be offering help rather than punishment seemed too good to be true. "Your Royal Highness, I don't understand," Sarah finally managed to say. "I stole from your family. Why would you want to help me?" William smiled gently, a gesture that reminded Sarah that beneath the royal titles and protocol was a man who genuinely cared about people's struggles. "Sarah, one of the things I've learned through my charitable work is that people rarely commit crimes out of pure malice. Usually, there are underlying circumstances that push them toward desperate decisions. Addressing only the crime without addressing those circumstances doesn't really solve the problem." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My stepmother is devastated by the loss of her ring, not because of its monetary value, but because of its sentimental importance. However, I think she would be equally devastated to learn that someone felt so desperate about their family situation that theft seemed like the only option." Sarah clutched the velvet pouch containing the ring, still struggling to believe what she was hearing. "What are you suggesting, Your Royal Highness?" "I'm suggesting that we return the ring to Camilla, explain the circumstances that led to its disappearance, and explore ways that our charitable foundations might be able to help with your mother's care needs. The Prince's Trust and other organizations we support work with families facing exactly the kinds of challenges you're dealing with." The conversation continued for another hour, during which William learned more about Sarah's background and her mother's condition. Sarah had left school at 16 to help support her family when her father died unexpectedly. She had worked steadily in various cleaning jobs, always trying to better herself but never quite able to get ahead of the mounting medical expenses and care costs. William was struck by Sarah's fundamental decency despite her desperate actions. She spoke lovingly about her mother, describing a woman who had worked as a nurse for 30 years before dementia began stealing her memories and independence. The irony wasn't lost on either of them that Sarah's mother had spent her career caring for others, only to find herself in need of care that her family couldn't afford. "I need to call my father and stepmother to arrange for the ring's return," William explained. "But I want to be clear about something, Sarah. This conversation we've had today, your willingness to be honest and return the ring voluntarily, and your obvious remorse will all be factors in how we proceed." When William called his father to explain the situation, Charles was initially focused simply on the relief of having the ring recovered. However, as William described Sarah's circumstances and her mother's condition, Charles found himself thinking about the broader implications of the situation. "The poor girl must have been absolutely desperate," Charles said after hearing the full story. "How is Camilla going to react to this?" "I think we should let Sarah return the ring to Camilla personally," William suggested. "Give her the opportunity to apologize directly and explain her situation. Camilla has always been compassionate about people facing difficult circumstances." Meanwhile, Camilla was in her private sitting room when Charles arrived to tell her about William's meeting and the ring's recovery. Her relief at learning the ring was safe was immediately followed by concern for Sarah's situation. "The poor dear," Camilla said, echoing Charles's reaction, "to feel so desperate about her mother's care that she would risk everything by taking my ring. How heartbreaking that must have been for her. William has arranged for Sarah to return the ring to you personally this afternoon, if you're willing to meet with her," Charles explained. "He believes it would be meaningful for both of you to have that conversation." Camilla didn't hesitate. "Of course I'll meet with her. The girl needs to know that while what she did was wrong, we understand the circumstances that led to it, and perhaps we can discuss ways to help with her mother's situation." That afternoon, Sarah arrived at Clarence's house with William, her nervousness evident, but her determination clear. She had changed into her best dress and carried the ring in its velvet pouch, ready to face whatever consequences awaited her. Camilla received them in her private sitting room, the same room where the ring's absence had first been discovered. She greeted Sarah warmly, immediately putting the young woman at ease with her genuine kindness and lack of judgment. "Your Majesty," Sarah began, her voice shaking slightly as she extended the velvet pouch, "I want to return your ring and apologize for the terrible thing I've done. I know there's no excuse for my actions, but I hope you can understand that I was desperate to help my mother." Camilla accepted the ring with visible relief, but her attention remained focused on Sarah. "My dear, I'm simply grateful that you've been brave enough to come forward and return it. William has told me about your mother's condition, and my heart goes out to both of you." As Camilla slipped the ring back onto her finger, the familiar weight and presence felt like a missing piece of herself being restored. But looking at Sarah's tearful face, she realized that this situation had taught her something important about the responsibilities that came with privilege and position. The meeting between Camilla and Sarah lasted much longer than anyone had anticipated. What began as a simple return of stolen property evolved into a profound conversation about family, responsibility, and the unexpected ways that people's lives intersect. Camilla found herself deeply moved by Sarah's dedication to her mother and the impossible choices that desperation had forced upon her. "Tell me about your mother," Camilla said gently, settling back in her chair with tea service arranged between them. "What was she like before the illness?" Sarah's face brightened for the first time since entering the room. "She was wonderful, Your Majesty. She worked as a nurse in the children's ward at King's College Hospital for 30 years. She used to say that helping sick children get better was the best job in the world. Even when she was exhausted after long shifts, she would come home and help me with my homework, make sure I had everything I needed." "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Camilla responded, genuinely touched by the description. "It must be heartbreaking to watch dementia steal away someone so vibrant and caring." Sarah nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes again. "The worst part is that she has moments of complete clarity where she knows exactly what's happening to her. She apologizes for being a burden, tells me I should focus on my own life. But she's my mum, Your Majesty. She gave up so much to raise me on her own after Dad died. How could I abandon her now when she needs me most?" William, who had been quietly observing the conversation, was struck by the similarity between Sarah's devotion to her mother and the royal family's sense of duty to the people they served. The circumstances were vastly different, but the underlying commitment to putting others' needs before one's own was remarkably similar. Camilla reached across the small table and gently took Sarah's hand. "My dear, what you did was wrong, and I think you know that. But I also understand that love for our family can sometimes push us toward choices we never thought we'd make. The question now is how we move forward in a way that helps your mother and prevents you from ever feeling that desperate again." Over the following hour, they discussed practical solutions. William explained that the Prince's Trust had connections with organizations that specialized in providing support for families dealing with dementia. There were programs that could help with care costs, respite services to give Sarah occasional breaks, and even job training opportunities that might help her increase her earning potential. "There's something else I'd like to propose," Camilla said thoughtfully. "I've been looking for someone to help me organize my charitable correspondence and maintain my calendar for events related to literacy and healthcare causes. It's part-time work that could be done from home when necessary, which might give you the flexibility you need to care for your mother while earning a steady income." Sarah stared at Camilla in disbelief. "Your Majesty, after what I've done, you would trust me to work for you again?" "Sarah, you made a mistake under extraordinary pressure, but you also had the courage and integrity to return what you took and face the consequences honestly. Those are the qualities I value in the people who work with me." The legal implications of Sarah's actions still needed to be addressed, but William and Charles had already spoken with the relevant authorities about handling the matter with discretion. Given Sarah's voluntary return of the ring, her obvious remorse, and her lack of any previous criminal history, the prosecutors were willing to consider a restorative justice approach rather than pressing formal charges. As part of this arrangement, Sarah would be required to perform community service, specifically working with elderly care organizations to help other families facing similar challenges. It was a consequence that felt meaningful, rather than purely punitive, allowing her to turn her experience into something that could help others. 3 months later, Sarah had settled into her new role working with Camilla's charitable foundation. Her mother's care situation had improved dramatically thanks to the support services they had accessed, and Sarah found genuine fulfillment in helping coordinate events and correspondence related to causes she cared deeply about. The ring itself had become something of a symbol within the royal household. While it retained all of its original sentimental value as a gift from Charles and a connection to Queen Elizabeth's legacy, It now also represented the importance of understanding and compassion in addressing people's struggles. Camilla often thought about the incident when she attended charity events related to healthcare and social services. The experience had reminded her that behind every act of desperation was a human being, facing circumstances that most people couldn't imagine. It reinforced her belief that their charitable work wasn't just about writing checks or making appearances, but about truly understanding and addressing the root causes of people's struggles. William, too, carried lessons from the experience into his future role as king. The incident had demonstrated the power of approaching problems with curiosity and compassion, rather than simply punishment and protocol. He made a mental note to remember Sarah's story whenever he faced similar situations where people's actions were driven by circumstances beyond their control. The missing ring had created a crisis that could have ended in scandal and prosecution. Instead, it became an opportunity for understanding, growth, and positive change. Sarah's mother received the care she needed. Sarah found meaningful work that helped her support her family, and the royal family gained a deeper appreciation for the real-world struggles that their charitable work aimed to address. Most importantly, Camilla's ring was back where it belonged, but its temporary absence had taught everyone involved that sometimes the most valuable discoveries come not from what we find, but from what we choose to do when something precious goes missing.